Hello, my beautiful goblins. Forget what you think about ancient Greece, you know, the toga parties, epic philosophers, and battlefield flexing. Sure, those things did happen, but they weren't the whole story. The real legends, the farmers grinding from dawn till dusk, making sure no one went hungry, and the whole civilization didn't just fall apart one day. Now, for those who don't know, welcome to Kronos History, where we break down the greatest moments in history and turn them into greater stories. Whether you're bored, learning, or somewhere in between, we've got something cooked up for you to keep you entertained. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. Enter Nikos, your average Greek farmer dude. He wakes up before the sun, dragging his basic tools into olive groves, vineyards, or dusty fields, hustling to feed his family and pay the polis's ever-hungry taxes. Whether he's a rich landowner or a struggling tenant, Nikos' grind is the backbone of ancient Greece. So let's get into what farming really looked like back then. The struggle, the social drama, and the constant battle against nature and death. Nikos' day starts early, like way before the sun has its first coffee. There's no tech to help him, just wooden plows, old sickles, and just a ton of muscle. Farming was tough, with the weather calling all the shots. Too much rain, not enough rain, or a sudden storm could just wipe out months of work. His harvest wasn't just for the fam though. It helped pay the taxes, support the army, and keep the polis running. Farming wasn't just a job, it was survival mixed with civic duty and some serious religious vibes. The whole polis depended on farmers like Nikos, whether they knew it or not. Nikos wasn't farming solo though. He was part of a social system that had layers, kinda like a political Twitter feed but with dirt and drama. At the top were the citizen landowners, who actually owned their land, had voting rights, and could influence politics. So if Nikos was one of those guys, he could show up at the assembly and actually have a say. Now next there were dependent peasants, kinda free but realistically politically sidelined. Think Sparta's helots or the perioikoi. Then, hired laborers worked other folks' fields for scraps or pay, the gig workers of their day. Metics were foreigners who sometimes owned land with permission. And of course, slaves were at the very bottom, with zero rights, working large estates. If Nikos was a citizen farmer, he had perks like voting, owning land, and defending his polis. But get this, defending wasn't free. You had to buy your own armor and weapons. He chipped in for public projects and religious festivals too. Family and clan duties were no joke back then. Greek society was a team game and everyone had their dedicated role. Now, most farmers like Nikos leased their land from the polis or other rich landlords. Slack off and you can get evicted just like that. Poor farmers often sank into debt, sometimes becoming tenants, or even worse. Aristocrats and officials managed the military and civil stuff, while the local deme communities handled taxes and duties. Taxes were no joke back then. Nikos had to pay war taxes, land rent, which was often a big chunk of the harvest, water fees, and food donations during rough times. Rich landowners sometimes faced extra costs called liturgies. Money was rare and most farmers barely got by. Hired hands earned about 1 drachma a day, enough for bread, wine, or olive oil, you know, the essentials. Often they were paid in goods and not even cash. And the work peaked during harvest and pruning seasons. Now, somebody like Nikos grew staples like barley and wheat, the carbs that kept Greece fed. Olives were essentials for oil, rituals, and trade. Grapes obviously turned into wine, which was basically liquid gold. He also grew legumes, cabbage, and onions for variety. Goats, sheep, and donkeys helped with work and food. A good farm could produce up to a ton of wheat per hectare in a good year. Most food fed the family with just enough left for taxes and then the market. Rent could take half the crop, and war taxes hit hard, but sometimes spare the poorest. Middle-tier farmers bought their own armor, while the poorest worked the fleet for pay. Markets and temples obviously took their cut too. Now, debt was the biggest threat. Poor farmers mortgaged land or crops at sky-high interest, like 12 to 18%, essentially ancient payday loans. Missed payments and you risk losing land or becoming a tenant or even a slave. Solon's reforms cancelled some debts, but farming life was a constant hustle to survive, pay duties, and avoid getting crushed by debts or the polis. Alright, so if you were a free dude hitting 18, congrats, you were drafted into the farmer warrior life. There wasn't a pro army, so every guy had to be ready to switch from plowing fields to slinging spears when the polis called. 2 years of ephebia, training from 18 to 20 was mandatory. You know, things like drills, javelin throwing, archery, and guarding borders. The state gave you a spear and shield, but the rest of your gear? Well, that came from your own wallet, or maybe a family stash. After training, you joined the militia roster and could get called up to fight until you hit 60. How you fought depending on your bank balance. Rich dudes went cavalry, rocking horses and armor. Most were hoplites, helmet, shield, spear, sword, sandals, all costing serious drachmas. Poor guys like Theets rode in the navy and earned a daily wage. Skipping service was a big deal. Could get you cancelled from citizen rights. Exceptions, well, only if you were old, sick, or temporarily broke. Nikos' home was simple. One-story mud brick or stone shack with a flat or sloped roof patched with tiles or reeds. Floors were packed dirt or clay shards. Inside, 1 or 2 rooms for sleeping and eating. You know, the essentials. A storage spot for grain and olive oil, and maybe a pen for a goat. Furniture, very minimal. Things like clay pots, wooden benches, and spinning tools if you're lucky. Windows were tiny holes with cloth. Lighting from torches or oil lamps, and heating from a hearth outdoors or inside the main room. Total minimalist ancient vibe. Nikos ate what grew locally. Things like barley, wheat, olives, grapes, and wine, legumes, onions, and cabbage. Meals were cooked over open fire in clay pots and eaten communally with hands or wooden spoons. No cutlery flex here. Dad ran the fields and defense. Mom handled spinning, weaving, cooking, and kids helped early. Slaves were a rich people thing. Most families just relied on their own sweat. Women mostly stayed home in cities, but helped with harvests and markets in villages. Farmers lived in villages with temples, elders, and local politics. Festivals matched farming cycles, planting, harvesting, full of partying, praying, and solving disputes. Everyone pitched in on big jobs like ditch clearing or fence building. When disasters hit, the whole village helped out. Religion was a huge deal too, with sacrifices and rituals keeping the gods chill and crops growing. Work started at dawn, paused in midday heat, then back at it till evening. Off-seasons had some public duties or military drills, but mostly it was all about that farming hustle, tied to nature's rhythm. Even in the sticks, Nikos was a citizen. He voted if he could get to the city, sent reps to courts, and fought as a hoplite when needed. Poor farmers had limited politics power, but they still belonged to the Polish family. These farmers weren't just dirty movers. They fed the city, fought wars, paid taxes, and kept traditions alive. Life was brutal, low pay, weather roulette, debts, but without Nikos and his crew, classical Greece would be nothing. They lived lean, worked hard, and held the polis together as citizens, warriors, and culture carriers. So next time you enjoy olive oil or wine, give a nod to Nikos, the original farmer soldier, grinding in the ancient dust, keeping the polis running one harvest and one battle at a time. And that's a wrap on ancient Greek farmer life. Next up on the machine, well, who knows? But you know it'll be a wild ride, like it normally is. Smash that like button, subscribe, and leave a comment if you think you could survive ancient Greece's scorching sun. And until next time, see you again on Chronos History.